Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your artist, Chris. So, I'm doing a live stream totally impromptu. I didn't even bother to announce it on any of my social media channels. Don't know if anybody will show up, but this whole month is an event for the G.I. Joe community called Cobra Convergence, so I felt like drawing a bunch more stuff, so that's what I'm gonna do. Need a pencil. So if anybody joins in, feel free to ask questions. If anybody doesn't, just understand, that for people that watch it on the archive, just having fun doing this. Oh, I do have somebody. Hello to Compared. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, feel free to type them out, and maybe we'll have a little bit of a conversation. Oh, another person. Hello, Rico. Just water. It's pretty hot out here. Something like high 70s outside still. Got the air conditioner going. Hopefully that's far enough away, and I've got the microphone down here like aimed at me, so hopefully you're not really hearing too much background noise. But if you do, sorry, that's what's going on. Hello to Software Agents and Lila and David Beard. Yeah, totally understand if people are just dropping in and then saying like, hey, it's too late. I know it's late. I just felt like drawing for about an hour and figured, you know what? Why am I just doing this down in front of YouTube? Like, I should just be streaming. So I am. How good is Born Again Daredevil? One of the best. Great story. Hello to Giantris. Hello Blue World Comics. Hello Channel. Siskart. Is this one for business or pleasure? Just pleasure. Just pleasure. Yeah, just trying to have some fun here. Just trying to figure this out here. I'm gonna turn it so that I can... What I'm trying to do here is like use my whole arm to pull the line and hopefully make it smoother than if I pushed and it got sort of caught a little bit. So sometimes you need to sort of rotate the paper to make that happen. And that's not too bad. That line will work. Oh, I'm glad you liked the Mad video. Thank you very much. Did you use deepfake software for... Not really deepfake, no. It was just face swap technology. In the end, I was like, you know what? This is like a 1-second gag, and it wasn't worth the resources to do a true deepfake. Although that would be fun someday to do for something. I don't know what, but maybe someday I'll do some sort of a deepfake as a gag. Yeah, so what I'm trying to do here is instead of just drawing from the wrist or trying to like push a line, it's good practice anyway, to try to move your entire arm, like, just pull backwards and use your whole arm. If you keep practicing that, eventually you do get a steadier line. Hello, Cleveland. Thank you very much for the compliment. Yeah, I totally understand not staying long, Blue World. Did not expect a big audience, but just felt like streaming for the heck of it. Thank you, Lila. Appreciate the compliment. Thank you, Village Goat. Let's see. Let Me Be Honest is asking, is Daredevil Yellow good? Got a lot of good reviews. I don't dislike it, but it also didn't wow me personally. So, like, that's my 5-second review. It's okay. It's not bad. It just didn't really do anything for me, like emotionally or like, yeah. Let's see. Is this gonna be a companion piece? Yeah, basically. So last time I streamed, it was also this month, and I sort of very sketchy, obviously, especially towards the bottom. Like started a little more detailed, got really sketchy as I finished because I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna wrap up, but I sort of wanted to have a little bit of structure there and play with the colors essentially. That's mostly what I was doing here, is playing with my color. Yeah, so just continuing, slightly more planned out here. I was drawing and watching YouTube stuff, and just decided, why not stream actually? So this character is called a Crimson Guard. If you don't know anything about G.I. Joe, that's okay. I know it's kind of dating me to be so into G.I. Joe, but yeah, the Crimson Guards were just sort of elite troopers. And in the comics, which is what I really like the most about G.I. Joe, is the comics, the Crimson Guards didn't really actually fight on the battlefield that much. They were typically more like businessmen. A Cobra would assign them a family to be part of, and they all had plastic surgery to look alike so that they could sort of replace each other. And these were sort of like sleeper agents that they would send out into the world to help control various aspects of business and politics. I always sort of liked that idea. So they did have like a dress uniform in case they were called on to go into battle or anything like that, but they had their own sort of special niche, and it was very, very much spies. They were basically spies. All right, so let's see. Who's my favorite G.I. Joe character? Snake Eyes. Do I have a favorite G.I. Joe episode? Not really. I liked the cartoon, but I wasn't super into it. I was more into the comics and to a degree the toys. Hello to all these people that have joined, like Seahawks, Alec, David, William, Johan, who else? Yeah. Beowulf. Is it as muggy there as it is here in Portland? It is. Like, the last week or so has been so muggy. It's gross. It's, I'm kind of used to that weather. I've lived in, New Orleans. I've lived in, D.C. These are pretty humid areas, but, it's usually a lot gentler, here in the sort of, Seattle area. So, it's been pretty miserable lately, actually. Any questions? Let's see. All right, good night, crazy gamers. It is late, so I totally understand. Is anybody reading Savage Avengers? I have not read Savage Avengers. Looks like an interesting lineup, but have not read it. Looks very orangey in here, but whatever. Trying to balance playing Battlefront 2 with boys and watching the stream. Well, trust me, I'm not offended if anyone just decides, hey, it's late, I'm taking off. I understand, but I do understand that I'm also very grateful for the company. I really am. Snake Eyes Volume 1 or version 1 or version 2? I guess version 2. I do like this sort of angular visor with the slits. That's probably my favorite overall Snake Eyes. But version 1, 2, and 3 are all really cool. After that, I'm not as into it, but the first 3 versions are all pretty cool. I have not reviewed The Crow. That is definitely a comic I will try to get to at some point. Definitely a comic that I'd read in the early 90s when I heard that it was going to be made into a movie, so I made sure to read it before that, and I really like that movie. It's very 90s. It is such a 90s movie, but that's in a good way. Like the music, the colors, and the direction. I like it, but I really liked Brandon Lee's previous movie, Rapid Fire, and I'd gone back and watched his other stuff, which wasn't much, but I was like, oh, Brandon Lee's pretty cool. I could get into being a fan of this guy. And then, of course, he died on the set of The Crow, which is kind of what everybody remembers, I think, about the Crow more than anything else. But you know, it adds an appropriate note of somberness to the whole proceedings. It doesn't really distract too much from what the movie is. It kind of adds to it in a bizarre way. But anyway, the comic itself is it's interesting. It's an indie book, and I'll get to it at some point. Do I read manga at all? I always thought it might be fun to get an episode on JoJo's. Well, a lot of people have asked me to cover JoJo's, so I did buy the first volume, but there's a lot to read there, so it's going to take me a while before I'm, in a position where I can give a detailed review about, the history, the techniques, just my overall opinions. So it is something I will discuss. I do have the first manga. I intend to keep reading it, and then I'll give an opinion. Do you think the Fantastic Four is coming to the MCU? Yeah, definitely. I don't know exactly how soon, but definitely I think that I think that the Fantastic Four will show up before X-Men, really. I think that the X-Men will come along too, but the thing about the Fantastic Four is it does sort of offer another sort of team that could take the place of the Avengers in a way, because they're sort of publicly beloved. And I really think that, honestly, Tony Stark sold Avengers Tower, we saw in Spider-Man Homecoming, and then in Spider-Man Far From Home, he does a web glide thing where he glides through the middle of what that building is, and at the bottom it says something big is coming. It's got a construction sign. It says something big is coming, and it's got a 1 in a circle, a 2 in a circle, and a 3 in a circle, ... Not that they have a specific plan, but I think that was definitely put there to imply the Fantastic Four is coming. Probably their Baxter building will take the place of where Avengers Tower used to be in the MCU. That's what I think. So, let's see. Do I have any favorite non-Marvel DC artists? I mean, so many. It's really hard to, where do you start, right? Where do you go? Plus also, so many have at least worked at some point at Marvel and DC, even if I don't necessarily associate them as being regular employees. It's really hard to on the spot while I'm doing this and answering other questions think of who some of my favorites are. But yeah, I'll try to think about it. Okay. Do you think Daredevil and the other Netflix heroes will ever come to the movies? I don't. I wish they would. I really like Daredevil. I think they really did a good job on Daredevil. Oh, let me pause real quick because I just got a super chat from William Gazka. Mr. Tropes. That's me now. I'm Mr. Tropes. In your comic wisdom, can you tell me at the time who had a better reception from fans? Silas Cyber, or Nimrod the Sentinel? Oh, when they came out when they were new? That is an interesting question. Probably Nimrod. I don't think Cyber was especially popular, to be honest. He was, he popped up, and he wasn't that popular after his first appearance, in my opinion. Oh yeah, I'm sure that the MCU will start completely from scratch with the X-Men. The old continuity is gone, and that's okay. I'm sure they'll do a good job. They might do a better job with a lot of adaptations and stuff like that, and bring in characters and sort of present them a little. I think that the MCU does do a good job at presenting the core of the characters, right? But it's hard to imagine a better actor portraying Wolverine. Hugh Jackman really did nail that. I think that the Fantastic Four could go a lot of great directions. I mean, one of the first things I think you'd have to... You could do some time travel stories, first of all. and they don't necessarily affect like the present because of the way Marvel's time travel rules work. But you've got like that as a science fiction thing. But I think what's really great is that you could certainly go like the negative zone. That hasn't really been used at all. I think that the negative zone and like introducing like Annihilus would be definitely like something that they could spread across like 2 or 3 movies as a threat, like, you know, involve the Guardians of the Galaxy or Thor, you know, some of the more cosmic things if they introduce the Eternals. You know, you've got not Sentinels, what are the cosmic beings, the gods, excuse me. We saw them briefly in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm spazzing right now. But Fantastic Four has the best villains. Certainly Doctor Doom. Come on, like, I would love to be seeing, like, Norman Osborn or Doctor Doom or Magneto presenting a threat for, like, between 3 to 6 movies where they're, like, sort of building up and have something that... Celestials. Thank you, No Justice. I was thinking of Celestials. Celestials are interesting to explore. They'll probably do that with the Eternals, I guess. What else? We should do a Doom movie and call it Drag Me to Doom because he has to rescue his mom from hell. That would be cool to see Doctor Doom like get introduced and then pop up in something like Doctor Strange 3 and not really be the villain, like actually have that Doctor Strange, Doctor Doom going to hell to rescue Doctor Doom's mother. Come on, that would be really cool. What is your most prized comic book possession? Well, I didn't keep most of my comics. I moved away like about 5 years ago from where I was living and sold most of them. So I only kept a few that like held like, you know, personal, sentimental value to me. I think I kept the Spider-Man Kraven's Last Hunt. I kept all my Tick comics. I really loved those as a kid. And I think some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. If you're talking about like what out of all of it is the most monetarily valuable, it's probably, you know, like I've got several copies of Walking Dead #1, I think #2, because, you know, I was working on it and I was given a ton of copies to just hand out to people. I think I had like, you know, 30 copies of Walking Dead 1 that I was just handing out to just people that I knew saying, oh, you should try this, it might be a good comic. And obviously that went on to have a lot of success. So I think I'm down to like 2 copies. But that one goes for a little bit of money. What other questions? Wish I still had my Wizard magazines. Oh yeah, I know. That would. I wish I didn't get rid of those. That's a nice outfit. Did your boyfriend make it for you? Yeah. Bonesaw is ready. He should definitely be the next big threat for the MCU. People, I guess, are talking about Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes is legit a pretty good actor. There's plenty of dramatic movies where, you know, he shows his chops. I think he's really good in things like New Jack City, or, you know, even like there's plenty of B movies. Like, what's that one? He did one that was based on a Michael Crichton novel, and I think it was with Sean Connery, like Rising Sun. He's just a detective. He's been a detective plenty of times. Anyway, he's a good actor, and he is also a pretty good martial artist. But he also kind of went crazy. You know, he smoked too much dope and didn't pay any of his taxes, and he went to jail. That's a really hard thing to rebuild your career from. But I still like Wesley. I legit do. I think they'll definitely do another attempt at G.I. Joe. I think it's harder to do it now than it was in the 80s. We were like really gung-ho about like our military in the 80s. Oh, no pun intended. There was a gung-ho in G.I. Joe. You know, we didn't actually have the same sort of fear, real-world fear of terrorists. I mean, Cobra, fortunately, is pretty goofy because they build like weather dominators and shrink rays and try to hypnotize people with rock and roll music. So they're not like it's not as offensive to have them as the enemy as, like, you know, if they were like bringing down buildings and stuff. But the world has definitely changed since the 80s, and I think it's harder to make G.I. Joe work like it did in the past. I can still enjoy that personally because I've got nostalgia, but I think it's harder to make it work these days. Personally, I think that it could work as sort of an international coalition, like recruited from the military, but they're like spies a little bit more than military, if that makes sense. I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, I think that they'll reboot Blade at some point. I think that they'll bring Blade in. I think that that's something that like the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't have right now, is like monsters. They have like aliens and robots and gods, but they don't have monsters, and they could. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you could go with Cobra. Cobra's more exotic and easy to update. What are my thoughts on Mike Mayhew? That's a guy that probably isn't as well known as he should be, but Mike Mayhew is a very talented artist. Excuse me, I'm trying to think of what I first saw him on. And I often, like, it for no real reason other than their names are similar, I confuse him with Mike Manley. Mike Mayhew and Mike Manley, so I have a hard time with that. What did I think of Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn? He was fantastic. That was phenomenal. That was so fun. I loved that. No, I think I really like the Raimi movies in general. The third one isn't as strong, but I also don't necessarily think it's as bad. Well, I don't get annoyed, I guess I should say, at some of the parts that annoy other people. Like, Emo Peter doesn't annoy me at all. I think it's funny, and I think it's meant to be funny. The only stuff that really annoys me is more just sort of like how many coincidences there sort of are to get everything going. But I kind of like what they did with Sandman. I like how they wrapped up Harry's story. Yeah, overall I kind of like Spider-Man 3, but it's also, of the Raimi trilogy, of course, my least favorite. It goes for me 2, 1, 3, but and I still might like Spider-Man 2 more than the new Spider-Man movies, but it's close, you know. I really enjoyed both Homecoming and Far From Home. I thought that those were both very enjoyable movies. So yeah. Didn't really care for the Amazing Spider-Man duology. Why did Harry keep the butler? I know! That guy was so old, too. It was like, let the poor man just retire and die. He was so old. Harry, let your butler go. I'm sure that they'll reboot the Ninja Turtles many, many more times in our lifetime. I just read the comment that they're trying to reboot it, and it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, the Ninja Turtles are pretty flexible in terms of how you decide to interpret them. I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Just something, that was like an early comic book discovery for me. Very shortly before the cartoon debuted. So, yeah, I love the Ninja Turtles. They're some of my favorite. Thank you, Melissa. Militia. scene where Sandman forms in the sand for the first time was really poetic. It was really well done, like special effects wise, emotional wise. Yeah, like that was pretty dope. I'm looking for a certain pen. Is this it? Yeah. They did a lot well with it. And it's a good classic Spider-Man villain. I would really like to see Kraven the Hunter. Maybe like, maybe it's not quite as personal at the beginning, but like, you know, maybe he learns Peter's identity or something and decides that hunting a superhero could be the biggest game of all. That would be pretty interesting. Maybe he teams up with his like half-brother Chameleon to really confuse Spider-Man. But I like Kraven the Hunter a lot, and I think you could basically have him literally defeat Spider-Man and try to do a better job being him. A portion of that Kraven's Last Hunt. I think that could totally work as a movie. But that's me. Would really love it if you did a Ralph Snart video one day. That is a pretty deep pull. What's something I want to bring to the channel but haven't been able to? Interviews. Just don't have like the time to set that up right now, more than anything else. I would really like to do more than just an interview. I guess I'd actually more like to do sort of like a deep dive mini documentary about various creators' day-to-day life and their process. I love Kraven's vest. Maybe some of the other stuff goes, but I love that vest with the lion's face and the lion mane up here. I think you could do that with still some like leather or armor underneath. I think that part is pretty key, and he's got to have his beard. What character do you want to see get an MCU movie that hasn't yet? Well, I mean, personally, I would love to see Daredevil be in the MCU so that he could, like, you know, meet Spider-Man and just sort of like, you know, mop up crime on a street level, but with a big budget. I would like to see that, since they've already done that as a TV show. Maybe the next closest thing that could be interesting is Moon Knight. I like street level stuff. Some other characters that I like that I'd love to see in the MCU. I would like to see Blade be brought in, a new version of Blade. Trying to think of what else would be good. How do you know when to add the shadow? Basically, I'm envisioning this like having sort of a very direct light source, so you like figure out the angle. So it's like, for me, it's sort of like coming in like kind of straight. This guy's helmet is black, so it's not really shadow per se, so much as like this is a little bit of a highlight. If I color this in, like this front part would sort of be highlighted, and this part would be darker. And so generally the shadows will just sort of be like beneath a fold of cloth. Like if there's a hump here, then there's a little bit of shading behind it. Things like that. So I don't have like, I have a pretty basic, like almost 1 point perspective, straight on light source here. She-Hulk and Daredevil, have they ever teamed up? I don't think so, but that's... Well, I'm trying to think. Like, Daredevil's absolutely always a public defender. She-Hulk usually works for, like, an actual law firm, which means she can sort of be a prosecutor or a defender, depending on, like, the client that they have. I can't think of a time where they necessarily teamed up or went against each other. I know they've met, but I can't think of a big story that culminated in any sort of a court case, which I think would be awesome. See ya, Altarf. Thank you for jumping in. What's the next vid going to be about? Should I just tell you guys, or should I keep it a secret? It's not as much of a secret this time. I always participate in the annual event called Cobra Convergence about G.I. Joe. On a broad scale, it'll be sort of about some obscure G.I. Joe comics. Marvel used to have a character called the 3D Man. Yeah, he came back as Triathlon, essentially. Not Kurt Busiek's best work, unfortunately. I think he'd mostly agree with that. Anyway, yeah, I just spoiled it. Like, next episode is basically about G.I. Joe. We gotta learn about G.I. Joe because knowing is half the battle. Who are some villains you want to see in the MCU? Personally, I want Super Skrull. Doctor Doom for sure, but basically a lot of the Fantastic Four villains would be pretty awesome. You know, something like anything from the Frightful Four to Doctor Doom to Galactus. They could all be done really well. Yeah. Excuse me. I'm calling the press now to alert them to your spoiling your next video. Yeah, I know. We need Brother Power the Geek. Maybe. Alright, Militia is taking off, I believe. Farewell. I'm getting tired too, everybody. I'm trying to understand the Shadow King from Marvel. Is the same Shadow King and Farouk the same person? Or Farouk body in control of Shadow King? Good question. They've sort of retconned some of this stuff, so I'm not sure if I'm up to date enough. Shadow King was a telepathic mutant, a very early one. So powerful that his essence could leave his body and possess another body if necessary. I believe his initial host might have been Farouk Amal. I definitely know that, like, in the 80s when he was introduced to, you know, like, the X-Men comics, he was in the body of a guy calling himself Farouk Amal. I'd have to read the Wikipedia to be 100% sure and, like, up to date. But essentially, he's just an incredibly powerful evil telepath. Pretty straightforward stuff. I'll look up the questions in 2 seconds, just filling in a little bit of fine detail. Alright, whoa, another super chat. Alright, William, what do you have? Another comic channel brought up that the pantheon of Marvel gods never mention or acknowledge Khonshu. Why do you think that is? Well, maybe it's simply a story that nobody's thought to really tell yet. The other thing worth noting is that, like, while the Thor comics have, like, rolled in different pantheons of gods, like, that's really the comic where gods show up, is Thor. You know, Hercules and the Greek gods showed up in Thor. Eventually, he introduced, like, some Japanese gods, but that was very recent. I would say that, like, that still could happen in a way. But isn't Khonshu, like, also, like, a completely fictional Marvel Egyptian character? Let me see. The MCU needs Mole Man. Well, Mole Man could be fun, though, with monsters. Yeah, Egyptian gods could definitely be really cool in, Oh, no, he is real. Okay, he is the Egyptian god of the moon. I was mistaken. I'm not an expert on, Egyptian mythology, that's for sure. So I didn't realize that. But, yeah, I think that it's just that it hasn't really been done yet. I don't think it's, like, anything other than that. Some of these, like, sort of circles that I'm making here don't actually represent anything. It's so much as, like, a lot of this gun, I can essentially sort of cheat. I get, like, the rough shape of what the gun that the Crimson Guard has. So I get the outline right. And I look, like, closely for things like a hand grip or, like, a silencer barrel. And then you can just sort of like color a lot of it in black with just sort of like white highlights to indicate things like knobs and just various sort of like molding. You don't have to be a big fan of G.I. Joe. I'm just drawing for fun and answering questions about comics, talking with people about whatever they want to talk about. Do you prefer the original male Captain Marvel or the female version the movie was based on? Personally, I prefer the original. You know, I guess I prefer the character of Carol Danvers over Marvel. I don't think that those original Captain Marvel comics were that interesting. They were really just created to keep the name. They're okay. They're not that exciting. The best thing about it is that they decided to give him like a real disease, cancer. They let him succumb to it and die, and that story carries a lot of weight because it's treated as a very real thing with his friends saying goodbye to him, and they haven't brought him back from the dead. And I think that the death of Captain Marvel is a fantastic story. Really, really good. The original character, though, of Marvel, I don't think he has that much of a personality, you know? He's just kind of there. He's just sort of generically heroic. There's not much to him. There's not even that much of a backstory other than he's sort of rebelling against the Kree Empire. So, if I had to choose, I would say that the Carol Danvers, even though she gets plenty of hate, I would say that she's a slightly more interesting character, for sure. Captain Marvel versus Captain Marvel, who wins? At this point, I think Carol Danvers has had more experience and like gained more power, so she would probably win. Actually, I'm trying to check something here. Yeah, I didn't really get this that straight. I'm gonna bring out my pencil to redo something. Where did I put it? Okay. Yeah, I guess I got the underside of the barrel better, but I didn't get either of them too great. Yeah. That'll look better. Doesn't really look like anything now, and I might not be able to finish this at the pace I'm going, but yeah. What are your top 3 favorite and least favorite foods? A really good steak, pizza, gnocchi, maybe? Those are 3 that I really love. Least favorite? I'd say escargot, oysters, lobster. I don't like much fish. I don't really like that. You asked. A lot of people love it. It's a luxury food, but yeah, I'm not a huge fan. All right, see ya, Layla. Thank you for watching, Roman. Let's see. The 1940s Captain Marvel was the first superhero to cross over into a live-action version. He starred in a movie serial. Yeah, I mentioned that in the video I made about him. I know that. Just kidding around. Let's see here. This is going to be tough. Yeah, I showed clips from that Captain Marvel movie from the 40s when I made that video. It's hilariously violent. Am I a gamer? I would say I used to be a little bit more of a gamer. Played a fair amount of things like Call of Duty and Halo, primarily. These days, I've devoted a lot of my free time to making comic tropes, so I really don't play a lot of video games anymore. And I sort of miss it, but, you know, that's just the way I've decided to do things for now. it's work, and then it's comic tropes, and that's about it. Do you hear Michael Korvac is the new villain for the MCU? No, I did not hear that, but Korvac could potentially work as a villain. Very powerful. Kind of can understand where he's coming from. I could see it sort of working. He doesn't have the most exciting name, but he's good. Who made that bangin' bass line from your intro? I forget the name, like it was a friend of a friend. So, sorry. Don't know. I forget now. Which second string Avenger would you like to see in the MCU? Tigra, Cloud, Firebird, Doctor Druid? Ugh, don't really care for any of those, to be honest. If I had to choose out of that group, I'd take Tigra. But other than that, Wonder Man. Wonder Man's not bad. So yeah, not to be controversial. I missed it. Sorry. Thank you, Henrik. I live in your city. I support your Patreon. Can we smoke weed together and read some comics? I don't smoke weed. Sorry, man. I used to use those markers all through the 90s. Lovely. Thank you. Comic Tropes has the best theme song on YouTube. I think you just get used to it. It's good. I liked it. It's pretty goofy. At some point, I will update my intro again, but I might. I think I'm gonna keep the song. There's always a first time to smoke weed. Yeah, I guess there could be. But I can't, because of my job. I can't smoke. Don't have anything against it. Plenty of my friends partake. It's legal here. But plenty of jobs can still say, that they don't want you to be working, doing like certain things if you're smoking. So for now, it's a no-go for me. I'll be right back to answering questions, just having kind of fun doing some small technical details here. I'll be right back to all y'all. Alright, let's see. I'm basically Luke Skywalker resisting the dark side. That's me. Ever worked with a 3D printer? I haven't gotten to play with one, but I do have a coworker who's helping me out, making me something for the next episode. So I would love to have a 3D printer someday. We'll see. Let's see. Any comic characters you had a crush on growing up? Can't think of actually having a crush on like a fictional drawing or anything. No. Was Wonder Man created to get the trademark? Essentially, yeah. Dual comic tropes on the time Superman fought Wonder Woman in World War II? Anything's possible. Great Lakes Avengers, yeah, maybe. They can do mutants now. Have I ever done video on Junji Ito? Yep, I have. Squirrel Girl is getting a movie at some point for sure. Well, she's supposed to be in the New Warriors movie that they announced like a year ago, a year and a half. They were going to do a TV show based on New Warriors. Don't know if that's still happening. But they cast someone as her. What's her name? Melania Von Traub? Do you think artists should study the style of famous comic book artists like Toth, or should they just go for something that is more themselves? No, I think you have to study what works first, and everyone will always have their own style, but I think you definitely should be studying some of the masters and seeing what they did right. You're depriving yourself if not. Yeah, that'd be kind of depressing, actually, to think of somebody like just not looking at guys like Eisner and Toth and Wally Wood. Like, wow, that would be. I would consider that a mistake to not study guys like that. I would consider that a big mistake. Be right with y'all, just obviously doing some inking. Marinara or Alfredo? Marinara. What comics have you read that have an insanely unique art style? Good question. I mean, I tend towards a lot of the more independent stuff, so almost anyone that Robert Crumb worked with, a really unique art style. Bill Sienkiewicz can be pretty experimental and really beautiful. Who else can be, sort of out there? Some people like Jim Mahfood. I don't dislike him, but that's not really my thing. But a lot of people... Oh, I know. Jamie Hewlett, Tank Girl. That's pretty out there style. Yeah. What's your favorite what-if alternative history in comic or non-comic media? There's so many to choose from. It's really, really hard. I don't have a good one off the top of my head. I guess Miles Morales from the Ultimate Universe is one of my favorite characters. So the Ultimate Universe would count. In terms of what if stories, I did an episode on that, so you can just watch that and see some of my favorite what ifs in there. With Batman, stuff like Gotham by Gaslight is really interesting. The Nail, for the Justice League of America story. Buscema or Byrne? John Buscema. But when I was younger, it was definitely Byrne. But opinions change. I've read Superman Red Sun. It's a really interesting premise. Cobra Commander, Serpentor, Cobra Commander every day. X-Men Age of Apocalypse. Yeah, it was a pretty decent story. Certainly at the time it was really fun. Some of so they rebooted all the titles, and some of like the X-Men titles during Age of Apocalypse weren't that great. They didn't have that many great artists, honestly, at the time. But the overall story was definitely pretty fun and cool and different. What else are people asking? You ever see the weird IDW crossover comics like Mars Attacks Transformers? No. I mean, I've seen them on the shelves. Haven't read them. They do look fun. Hopefully someday. What If published so many good stories? My favorite was What If Elektra Had Lived. Yeah, that was interesting. Snowflame? I don't know, Cara Bear. I don't think that one's ever going to happen, but you never know. We live in a weird time. Maybe that should be the big bad for the final season of Arrow, is Snowflame. I get my power from cocaine. No, I didn't read the Justice League Power Rangers crossover. Do you prefer regular scarred face Cobra Commander or snake face? I don't like snake face, let's put it that way. Yeah, Conan in the modern era kicks the stars and stripes out of Captain America because nobody loses to Conan. That's, I guess, the rule. I have read the Starman comics from the 90s, but I haven't reread them in quite a while. That could actually be fun. That's a potential episode. Now that I think of it, that was some really good stuff. Whenever I think about the G.I. Joes, I think about the crummy CGI movies or the kids' action figures. What do you like about G.I. Joe? Well, I really like the comic, A Real American Hero by Larry Hama. It went from like about 84 to 95 with Marvel, and then it came back a few years ago through IDW. It's a continuation, and they've had like about 100 issues or more. So I like the characterization by Larry Hama. It's a good mix of like, you know, actual like military tactics and stuff, spy games, ninja battles. It's really cool. Am I going to cover any of the Warren Publishing titles like Vampirella? Well, I do always do a bunch of horror stuff during October, don't I? So maybe it's something I'd cover then, huh? Anything you guys mention, it's all potential topics. Like, there's nothing like related to comics that I would really consider saying no to, you know? Like, even if I don't like it, I think that there's usually something we could learn. It's just that the way I prioritize is I'm like, okay, you know, what haven't I done lately? Or what's like, you know, a big creator who I just haven't gotten to yet. There's so many, you know? And beyond that, like, I like to try to throw in some foreign stuff, throw in some indie stuff, throw in some older stuff, throw in mainstream stuff. You know, I like to try to vary it up. Yeah. Who do you think is an overrated comic writer and an overrated... I don't know. That's so negative. I mean, I'm not, like, bashing you. Like, you know, it's just that, like, I don't want to, like, necessarily just throw a creator under the bus. Whereas if I'll review them, I'll just say, like, hey, this is not my favorite. Oh, somebody says that they remember me from the Pencil Jack days. Yeah, Pencil Jack, back in the day, before there was really any social media, of course, there were just forums. Before there was even, like, Reddit. And the big one that I was on, well, originally it was Wizard World. But that, all things considered, didn't last that long. and a lot of us migrated to a site called Pencil Jack, and there were some great times in those early days, like, you know, with a lot of amazing up-and-comers. A lot of people that you'll see on comics today. You know, Ryan Ottley and Robert Kirkman. Just tons of great, great artists and writers that were coming up at the time. And I think that for the most part, we all got along really great. Some of us became really close friends. Some of my best friends are guys that I met on that website, Pencil Jack, and then we'd meet at conventions, and now we'll, like, you know, actually just, we're just friends, you know, we talk on the phone, we meet each other, like, you know, yeah. I don't know, I'm not familiar with Kentaro Miura's work, I'm sorry. Sorry. Who do you think is underrated? It's an interesting question. Who's underrated? I would say that, like, somebody that's really close to, like, the top, but is still underrated is Sean Gordon Murphy. I think people are starting to realize that he can write some good stuff, and he's also, like, a really amazing artist. Rick Remender is nowhere near as appreciated as he should be. What's a moment in any comic that tugs on your heart? Mine is when Batman leaves a Thanksgiving meal for Grundy in The Long Halloween. That is nice. Let's see. That's tugs at my heartstrings. Probably a lot of them are going to be more like based in reality. For instance, something like Craig Thompson's Blankets, or really almost all of Craig Thompson's work can make me tear up and cry. But getting to know characters for a really long time, like, you know, a 5-year-long run that, like, ends. Some of the books that were through Vertigo, basically, I'm talking about things like Preacher to a degree, but definitely Why the Last Man. Like, when you just sort of are like, wow, we're saying goodbye to these characters that I feel like I really know very well, and it ends on, like, you know, just like the perfect note, even if it's not perfectly happy. Like, you know, that's some stuff that's made me tear up. Oh, okay, he publishes Berserk. Thank you very much, Kentaro Miura. Who's the better Hawkeye, and why is it Kate? Kate is very funny and cool. I've always had, like, a little bit of a fandom, I don't know what you'd call it, for, like, Hawkeye. I really like that character. He's kind of got an attitude, but for the most part, he can back it up. And he just hangs with superheroes, even though he himself rarely has any superpowers. I mean, he has had them, but he's just like, yeah, bow and arrow, and I'm gonna be ready to go up against, you know, gods and aliens, and kind of like that attitude. Sam Keith is underrated. Maybe. You know, I think that, like, sometimes underrated means that they have to be consistently putting stuff out, but I would agree with you. Sam Keith probably is underrated. And I know a lot of people would really like me to cover his work, so I definitely will. I don't know exactly when, but probably at this point sooner than later. I definitely listen, and some of the stuff that gets requested the most is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Sam Keith. I think that those are honestly the two that I get hit with the most. Possibly My Hero Academia. They're all things that I'd love to talk about. Hawkeye and Bullseye have the same power? Not quite, because Hawkeye doesn't necessarily have, like, he doesn't tend to throw things, you know what I mean? Like, I've never really seen him, like, just pick up a rock and throw it perfectly. He'd probably be very, very good at it. But, you know, he uses archery almost exclusively. That's what he trained in, and he's also trained extensively in fighting under Captain America. So he's a fantastic hand-to-hand combatant, and a master archer. Like, even though the show Arrow makes Green Arrow look like he's, you know, fantastic in hand-to-hand fighting, in the comics, Hawkeye would probably be able to beat him because they'd probably have comparable archery skills, but if they got into close quarter combat, Hawkeye would definitely have the advantage. Somebody, Iron Shell says, read Ronin by Frank Miller and Lynn Varley. It's probably my favorite indie work of Miller's. Well, I don't think you can quite call it indie because it was published by DC, so I wouldn't really call it indie. But I know what you mean. It's really good. Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to cover Jeff Smith sometime soon, Care Bear. Definitely. I love Jeff Smith. Is Hawkeye a bad copy of Green Arrow? No. I think that, like, Green Arrow was really a copy of Batman mixed with Robin Hood. I mean, he flat out dressed originally like Robin Hood, like with the little cap and the... Yeah, he just looked like Robin Hood, and I mean, he just was Robin Hood. But he had everything Batman had. He had the Arrow Cave and the Arrow Car, and he was a rich guy that, like, you know, decided to fight crime. He was a copy of that, whereas Hawkeye did not start as a copy of Green Arrow. He started as a guy that was, like, working at the circus that, like, got, like, blackmailed into being a supervillain and going after Iron Man. He was a villain for Iron Man, and then he approached the Avengers and asked if he could join them. So, yeah, I feel like Hawkeye didn't really start off as any kind of a knockoff of Green Arrow, really. He's got a different sensibility. I'm glad, Adam, that you discovered Junji Ito through that video. That's really nice to hear. That's really nice. Junji Ito's definitely a master, you know? He's great. You know who I haven't really done that I really think is, like, possibly the best living artist, like illustrator, I mean, not like necessarily painter or other arts, but like one of the best living illustrators, although he does very little actual sequential art. But Kim Jung-gi, guy is a master, and if you ever have the opportunity to watch, like, or attend, like, a seminar that he teaches, you're gonna learn a lot. I've met him a couple times. Only speaks Korean, but usually has translators with him. Very kind, very talented. Kim Jung-gi. G-I at the end. Kim Jung-gi. Wow. Is there a Marvel miniseries in the 80s that you thought should have had a full-time title that didn't get one, that didn't end up getting one, or took forever to get one, like Wolverine? No, I think that most of the characters and concepts that I wanted to see did get addressed. I think for the most part. I don't think I was ever really going like, oh, there has to be another Power Pack book. You know, I was never really like that. I would say, oh yeah, somebody's saying there's lots of reformed villains in the Avengers: Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Rogue. Well, she's more X-Men, isn't she? I was instantly thinking of Secret Avengers, not Secret Avengers, Uncanny Avengers, the Avengers Unity Squad. But that's another example, excuse me, of somebody that was like, because I was just going to say the X-Men also have a lot of reformed villains. Most of them don't stay that long, but, you know, Magneto, Sabretooth, Mystique, they've all been X-Men team members. So the X-Men also try to reform their villains, but I don't think they have as much lasting success. Oh, yeah. Brat Pack is a really tough read, but it is interesting, and it's interesting. Yeah, I'm glad you checked it out. Care Bear says the interior artist she most likes is J.H. Williams III. Totally get that. Magneto can't make up his damn mind, yeah. Sorry, I was trying to see if I had my phone. I'm not sure what time it is. It's getting close to when I should call it a night, just because I also have work tomorrow like most of y'all. So what I'll do is this might be one that I come back to, actually, like do another live stream and continue to ink and then color, because there's actually quite a bit left to do here, but I kind of like how it's coming out, and I think it might be worth revisiting. I'm just going to give it an overall sort of darker outline for some of this stuff. And then I think I'm going to call it. But I really appreciate that so many people showed up. I honestly expected this to be a very quiet event just because of how late it is. It's really kind of you guys to come in and ask such interesting questions. Would you check out some alternate universe stories of popular heroes like Earth 1, Batman, and Ultimate Spider-Man? Would I check that out? Like, yeah, I've read stuff like that, of course, yeah. Oh, let me be honest, doesn't have to work tomorrow, nice. Have I read Ennis's run on the Demon? Only an issue or two. It was interesting. I think Geometry Mastery is actually one of Cyclops' powers. Yeah, him and Captain America. Wow, super chat. Thank you, Henrik. That's very, very kind of you. Basically £5. Final question. Thoughts on the Aliens Defiance series of recent? It had a lot of 3D tracing, which was weird. Maybe just me? But the aliens. I didn't read Aliens Defiance. Who was the illustrator on that? Let me look it up. Aliens Defiance. There was an Aliens book recently by James Stokoe that's, I think, worth checking out on a related note. Let me take a look at this Aliens Defiance. Oh, Brian Wood. Huh. I'm just trying to see. Did Brian Wood write it or draw it or both? Oh, okay. Oh, it was illustrated by 4 or 5 different artists. Tristan Jones, Riccardo Burchielli, Tony Brasini, Stephen Thompson. Huh. Well, I guess I'd have to take a look, Henrik, to see who did what to make an informed opinion, but yeah. So I guess I'll just have to call this part 1 and come back to it, because there's a lot to do here, a lot to finish in this gun. I think the colors would make it pop in an interesting way, but it's just already pretty late. I should probably have called it a while ago, but what can I say? I wanted to do this, and when I get to talk to people, it stays pretty interesting. So I'm really grateful, folks, for the company tonight and the questions. Yeah, I think that sort of does the majority of, like, the exterior. Still have quite a few details to fill in here. It's hard to stop, because I'm at a point where I can sort of see where it's going, and that makes me want to continue, but I also have to be fair to myself tomorrow, because I'm going to be feeling this already. Let me just at least do this Cobra stuff, and then I'll say goodbye. Thank you all for the interesting questions. You like the inking on the mask? Thank you. I was a little worried that it wasn't consistent, but I'm not sure yet. Like I think that when I add the colors, it can help even some of it out. Where was I? I was just drawing something that I felt I needed to do, and I lost it. Oh well. You know what? That's okay. That just means it's time to stop. From here, I'm going to like be using like finer tools, like like some microns and stuff to get like some of the details on the suit done, and then I would be going in with various shades of grays. That is a gray, to sort of figure out the shading. So I've got a pretty nice set of like a variety of grays that really help. And then from there, I would, on top of the gray, lay down, like something like a red or something for the suit, some of the other colors. And that'll really help it, like, I think I can help blend it and make it look have a little more depth. So anyway, I'm going to take off, folks. Thank you very much for everything. I think I've thanked you a couple times, but I mean it. It's very fun to draw. It's very fun to draw with an audience. Live drawing is great. When I have more time, or if I think ahead, I can do more drawings like right in front of you from scratch with my pencil, and maybe then like lightbox to tighten it up like I did here. I'd love to show you more of that. I really would, because I know I do a lot of inking, I do a little bit of coloring. I don't do a whole lot of penciling in front of you, and I'd like to. I really would. I've done some, but I'd like to do more. So just know that that's something that will come in future streams. I've got a lot of really cool stuff coming up for Comic Tropes. I've got a lot of like sort of big episodes, but I say big meaning like research heavy, or episodes that tend to be closer to like 25 to 30 minutes as compared to like a 15 to 20 minute video. Those take me like I still produce them in the same amount of time within a week, but it means I'm staying up way later, like doing a lot more work on certain episodes, and so I sort of have to give myself like a break by doing something sort of light and funny after that for like an episode or two. But I've got a lot of big ideas for like creators, just talking about like sort of more deep dives into industry aspects, like the actual evolution of comics. I would really like to talk to you guys soon about like the age before the golden age. There were comics before the golden age, and it's a rarely explored era of American comics. I've got some big name creators that I definitely want to cover this year, and of course the big episode that's like almost intimidating me is I want to discuss Akira, and I'm going to do that in Japan. I'm planning that out to like try to be something a little more special. It definitely could be something that I do this week, at home, but I want to make it a little more special. I'm actually going to Japan for it. I've gotten, because of where the channel is at, and this is all thanks to you, I've gotten, I could, and I did, apply so that I can record in YouTube studio spaces. They have actual studios in several cities, including Tokyo. There's a studio with a great view of the city behind it. I plan to record my Akira episode there, talk about the importance of the manga and what Katsuhiro Otomo has done. So, yeah, there's somebody who's just surprised that I've got a giant burger back here. It's taking a lot of planning to try to make that episode be something good. There is a name for what came before the Golden Age. I'll get to it. So anyway, I'm working right now like quite a ways ahead. Like not every episode ahead, but I'm working on some of them that require a lot of planning. And this episode that I'm doing this week, I'm trying to finish in a small animation sequence. I did an animation this time last year, so if you haven't watched that video, a lot of people, not as interested in G.I. Joe, and I get it. That's okay. I didn't expect my G.I. Joe videos to get the biggest views, but I did a G.I. Joe episode last year about Jeremy Dale. a late friend of mine who did some G.I. Joe comics. And I think if you want something really entertaining, go back and at least watch the first 30 seconds of that. I did an animation for that I'm pretty proud of. I think I did a good job of mimicking the G.I. Joe style, and I spent months on that one. This one, it's a little shorter, but I think I'll have a cool animation for this episode if everything works out. So that's some stuff that's coming up, kind of like a little sneak peek for just the few that were watching this live stream. Grateful for your just watching. And if you can hit like and subscribe on my channel, that helps a lot. All right, folks, take it easy. I'll see you soon. Keep reading comics.